Hi, hello everybody. Today I am bringing you a swatch video. I recently got two new BlendBunny palettes and I kind of wanted to do some swatch comparisons, mostly because when I was just swatching them myself when I first got them, I noticed there were some similarities and I just kind of thought it would be interesting to do that in video format instead of just doing it myself like I kind of already did a little bit. I recently got the Lure palette, which looks like this. This is one I've had my eyes on for a while. I have used this several times. This shade Pearl is absolutely stunning. I really like the cool tone row here and the teal row. They're both my favorites that I've used so far. And then I got the Primal. This is actually why I ordered. They are discontinuing at least this version of the Primal. And this is a palette I've had my eyes on since they released it. And the thing that kept me from finally purchasing it was the large black and white shades, because I'm not going to use those. But I did like the rest of the palette enough to go ahead, and when they had it on half off, I decided it was time. It was, it was now or never. And I really love the packaging. That's one thing. BlendBunny's packaging is stellar. Like, it is so sleek, and I don't know, there's not really a whole lot of bells and whistles, but like, it's just stunning. Like the glitter here, how it's kind of textured like scales. The same with this one. Like, this is raised, and it's just, it's beautiful packaging. Especially a step up from like the Dollhouse and even the Surge, which are the two palettes I've had. I've had these for a year and a half or more now. I've had them for quite a bit of time. This is the Dollhouse. This is the only palette I have that has a mirror from BlendBunny. I believe it may be the only palette from BlendBunny with a mirror. This is kind of their take on a neutral palette. And I use this palette pretty often, as well as the Surge, which is my favorite BlendBunny palette. And this is their kind of brights palette. This row of neons, I believe like 3 or 4 of these shades of neons actually glow under a black light. These shades are quite beautiful. Flash is kind of the gold version of Pearl from the Lure palette, and that's, something we're going to look at. And then, of course, BlendBunny's signature 3 blending rows, that's why it's BlendBunny. So you have, a light row, a medium row, and a deep row, which is something I really enjoy about BlendBunny, and how organized it is. I like it. That's what has drawn me personally to BlendBunny, is how unique it is, but also how, here's my cat over here beside me. In case anyone wanted to know, he meows, he's fine. He's probably going to go through here and say hi in a second. Oh, look, there's some paws. He likes the sound of my voice, and when I film, I talk. And normally when I talk, I'm talking to him. And so it confuses him. He's not upset. He has food. He has water. My husband is in the other room. If there's anything actually wrong, he will be taken care of, even if it's not by me immediately. There is nothing wrong with my cat. I do get comments about that from time to time, but Kelvin is just fine. He just likes attention. He doesn't like when the attention is not on him. Come here. You can sit beside me, but you may not. We've talked about this. You can't chew on the phone. But anyway, sorry, side note, and peek of the kitty. And again, since my hands are up here, he's going to be drawn to coming up here until he gets distracted by something else. Kelvin, no. Actually, give me just a second. All right, Kelvin has been giving kitty treats. Okay, so we're actually going to start with the Surge palette. And so, as you can see, the Surge palette is a 30 shade palette for a surge of creativity. Fall is about to be lit. 18 matte shades, both eyeshadows and pressed pigments, and a gradient of darkest to lightest for a grungy blend, 6 creamy formula shimmers, and 6 poppin' neons to add a surge of color to your deep, moody, toned looks. Our matte formula is the same as the beloved Blend's matte formula. Our shimmers are creamy like butter and apply amazingly with fingers on the lid, and our neons are pressed and ultra pigmented. 4 of the shades, neon yellow, orange, pink, and green, are UV reactive, meaning they glow under UV blacklight. So that is me reading off of the BlendBunny website. So this is the second palette BlendBunny made, and the first one with shimmers. And so we have this row that has a white, kind of a green, and then a black, which is a little bit unique, as most of their gradients, as you can see, are all the same shade of color. But, you know, and then you have this gold, and then the neon yellow. And then you have kind of like a burnt orange row, pink row, purple, blue, and green. Alright, and then we have the dollhouse. Kelvin, please don't knock that off, buddy. Oops. And the dollhouse is a neutrals, the BlendBunny Cosmetics way. This 30 shade palette, both eyeshadows and pressed pigments, features complete matte trios and warm browns, vintage mauves, romantic roses, warm grays, and smoky khaki tones. Our creamy shimmers are everything you need for a sparkly, smoky moment to a pop of unexpected color. And this palette has 2 rows of shimmers that go pretty well with, you know, again, the duller, more neutrally colorful shades. And I do like this version of a neutral palette. And this is very cool toned because even this row here, they're so dusty that they're taupey and, you know, very cool toned. They did kind of start to move away from having a shimmer that exactly matched, but that's because they have shimmers on the bottom that are dark shimmers that go really well with these colors, and then a light shimmer that could more or less work with any of these shades. So like with Mannequin and Pin Curls, they go pretty well. And Tulle is the same way, but then we get to Pretend Lace and Glass Eyes, and they don't really go the same with their rows. So, you know, we're already starting to see some moving away from having a shimmer that matches, except they do have shimmers that match. So with their other row, they really didn't need to. I think this is the only palette they have that has 2 rows of shimmers as well. And then we have the Primal palette, which is the 3rd palette that they released. And this is still currently available if anyone's interested, and it currently retails for $21.50 USD. As they are, again, they're discontinuing it, but the creator has said she may bring it back, and it may be different. I don't really know how that will look, but you know, so if you're interested in it how it is now, I would get it. But if you're interested but not, you know, in desperate need of it, you might wait because they may bring it back in the future. When your tones are different, the outcome is different, and that makes the whole look different. Born from the small gaps in the blends palette and color inspiration derived from the wildest, most beautiful parts of nature, the Primal palette is a whole different kind of rainbow. 20 matte shades, both eyeshadows and pressed pigments, and 6 ultra shiny shimmers for any gorgeous look you can dream up. And I honestly have not really enjoyed the shimmer formula in this palette as much as in the other 2. They're more pigmented for one, but they're also a lot drier in comparison. I haven't used it a whole awful lot at this point. I've had this a little over 2 weeks. But I have used it a couple of times, well, more than a couple, like, you know, 4 or 5. And I just don't like these shimmers very much. Again, they're just too dark, which their highlighter palette came out at the same time this did. And that was what the creator said, was she kind of designed, you know, this to fill the gaps in the blends palette, these parts. And then also people were using up their white and black. And so she put bigger pans in this one, but I don't have the blends palette, so I can't compare if these really do fill a gap. All I personally feel is that these shades kind of overlap what's happening in a couple of their other palettes, and we'll get there when we get there. But again, I don't like these shimmer shades, and there are darker shimmers in both of the other palettes we've gone through. I just feel like they're a better formula. And I've heard other people say the same thing. Now, the matte shades I think are beautiful, but especially this row of kind of like indigo and periwinkles, I think those are stunningly unique shades. And then lastly, we have the Lure palette, and this is one of their smaller palettes. It just has one row of shimmers, and then, you know, the 3 shade rows of matte shades. So the Lure palette is 24 shades for the mermaid within. Shades inspired by the fantasy of mermaids, tales of pirates, and the beauty of the ocean. Our signature trios of depth, mid, and transition tones, and a variety of magical tones for all your mermaid-inspired looks. We can't wait to see the beauty you create with our Lure palettes. And this palette, again, I love this. This is a color story I personally adore. I love the mermaid theming. This packaging, oh my god, this is stunning. I had the Mermaid Shell Compact that Tarte did. I had that palette for years, and part of me regrets decluttering it, but I didn't use the shades in it. I just kept it as like a display piece, and I was moving at one point, and I just, you know, I had to get rid of some stuff, but like, it's beautiful without being bulky, and I really like that. I think these shimmers are some of the best shimmers BlendBunny has done. Hands down, the best. The matte shades I like pretty well, but I do feel like this is where they've kind of start to become, like, there's only so many rows like this of matte shades you can do, right? And you can put them together in different combinations, which is what we're going to do in this video, to, like, you know, we're going to be comparing them, because I don't think that's bad. Because honestly, I have 4 of their palettes, and that's only half of the palettes they have available at this point in time. I think they have 3 other palettes. One that's a little 4-pan that has multi-chromes in it. They have a palette that's the same size as this, and then another palette that's more in size with the bigger ones, I believe. So, and then of course their original blends palette. So I mean, not everybody is going to have all of the palettes. Again, I only have 4, and there are 8 of them at this point, I believe. But I really hope this video, as I compare them, will help anybody who is interested and only wants 1 or 2, that they don't get 2 palettes that heavily dupe the vibes of each other. So we are going to get started, and I will try to put timestamps down in the description box below for anyone who is just interested in looking at swatches. But we are going to get started. Okay, what we're going to do first is we're going to swatch all of the kind of brown shades in the palettes. So we're going to start with the Dollhouse here, and we're going to go with this row and this row. So like the cool toned row and then the warm toned row, and then we're going to go through the other palettes and see what other shades we can find that would be similar. So I'm going to say the names as I put them down, and I will attempt to say the names again if I remember to. But here we have Display, Attic, and then we have Stitched, which is a black. And then we have Pose, Vintage, and Silhouette, which is kind of like a deep brown, like it's like a very deep, like coffee brown color. It looks black. I'm concerned it might look very black on camera, but it really isn't. Alright, so that's all of the brown shades from the Dollhouse. We're gonna look. I don't think there's any in the Surge. No, those are not brown. But in the Lure, there are some kind of cool toned taupey shades. So we're going to do those here. So we have Storm Ahead, and it very definitely, like, it's a very, like, purpley pinky kind of tone. Like, it's very lavendery. It's, like, my favorite shade in this palette. And then we have Pirate's Life. And last we have Black Sea, which is a black. And that is my one, you know, caution, is there is a black in every single one of these palettes. So if you do not use a lot of black, that could be, you know, maybe that could be an issue for you. It kind of is for me. I don't use black. And this black is very dull in comparison to this one. Like, it almost could be like a dark brown, but since this is a dark brown, they're not really, like, there's definitely, you can tell this is very charcoal. It's not like the depth of black, and it doesn't have the pigment of this one from the Dollhouse, but it definitely is black. And we will swatch all of the deep shades by each other as well. And yeah, there is no more browns in any of the palettes. So as far as that goes, I do think the Lure has done what the Dollhouse did. I mean, you can get a very similar look. Like, yes, that's more pinky colored, but I think, you know, most people are going to put that in the crease or use it to blend one of these shades out. So I think you could get a very similar vibe look, which again is the thing. I don't think any of these are really direct dupes other than these two browns are very similar. I'm just now noticing that. But yeah, I do think it is very close for someone having both palettes, as these palettes are just very large, you know, and if you're like me and you kind of, it's not even about having unique color stories, it's about having unique shades. Like, I'm more concerned about how many pans I have in my collection than palettes at this point, and you know, having a bunch of big palettes might not be necessary if you can do everything with one. You might could do with what you already have in your collection. Now we're going to move on to the purple shades, and again, starting with the BlendBunny palette, this is Hold Me, No Strings, and Cinched, which is a deep plum. Now, No Strings is more of like a taupe in my opinion, and we're going to swatch a couple of the other, we're going to swatch several of the taupe shades against each other here in a while. But right now I'm just doing different color sections, I guess. These are from the Lure palette. So we have Jellyfish, Seductress, and Tentacles. And then we have from the Primal palette, Winged, Exotic, and Instinct. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this kind of periwinkle row. So we have Mimic, even though these are more blue, Poisonous, and Ink. Okay, and then from the Surge, we have Beckon, Stay, and Covet. So again, lots of similarities, especially in the light and mid-tone shades in all three of these rows. So these are from the Primal palette, this is the Surge, and this is the Lure. The shades from the Dollhouse are very dissimilar, as they're very dusty. They're more mauve, but like these three from what is this? The Lure, the Surge, and the Primal palette. Those are so similar. So similar. Like there is a row of that kind of magenta, purpley pink in each of them. That's wild. I never I didn't realize that until just now, how wickedly similar those are, especially from the Lure and the Primal, or no, from the Lure and the Surge. This is the Lure, this is the Surge. Like, wow, that's insane. There, let's see if we can get that better in there. I mean, those just look so similar to me. It's kind of wild. I say this in every video, but if anyone's curious, I use baby wipes. Just, you know, those fragrance-free ones, whatever ones, you know, are cheapest at Walmart. That's what I use. I don't use makeup wipes because I don't use makeup wipes on my face, but that is what I use to clean, like, makeup swatches off my hands and stuff. Alright, and so next we're going to do kind of yellowy tones. And I'm going to start again with the Dollhouse, simply because it has, you know, those kind of like yellowy khaki shades. So we're going to start with shade Porcelain. And we're going to do Figure, which is kind of like a baby poop green. And then Madam, which is like a very dark, like muted, like khaki, dark brown. It's kind of like a weird shade, but it's very pretty and unique. Alright. Look in the Primal. And here we have more of a lighter yellow. This is Prey. And then we have Ray, which is more of like a true yellow. And then Soil, which is actually a really light brown in comparison to a lot of the other deepening shades we have in these palettes. Around. And then we're going to go into the Surge, and there are no yellows in that one outside of Shocked, which we're going to put over here because I don't really think there's going to be anything that comes even close to these neon shades. But then we're going to look in the Lure palette, and there's no yellows in that one. So, you know, as far as yellows go, this is what we got. There's not a whole lot of overlap with those in these palettes. Which I'm personally okay with because I'm not really like a yellowy kind of a person. So, you know, those are the yellows we have. Continuing with the theme of starting with the Dollhouse, we're going to do the pinky colors. So we're going to start with Baby Doll, which is this very pretty light pink. Then we're going to do Rouge, which is more of a deeper magenta. And then we have Plume, which is a deep berry shade. Like a deep berry shade. Alright, we're going to move to the Primal. And this one has two rows of kind of like pinky shades, but one of them leans more purple, so I'm going to leave it, I don't know, I might swatch this light pink winged, but it definitely leans more purple, right? And so we're going to then do Nectar, Warning, and Lethal. Which Lethal is very similar to this middle shade Rouge. It's just kind of more berry, where these are very muted. These are, the ones in the Primal palette definitely have more brightness to them. Alright, and then we're going to do the Lure palette, and we do have some pinks here. So we have Baited, which is exactly the same as this shade from the Primal palette. like very little difference. And then we have Booty, which is more of a very bright magenta. And then X marks the spot, which is a very true magenta. And then I'm going to go ahead and also swatch Jellyfish from the Lure palette, because I think it's also, again, it's very similar to Baited, but very similar to this shade. Alright, so I might go ahead and do Storm Ahead as well, just because it's another very light kind of purple. And then we're going to look in the Surge palette. Yeah. We have Cheeks. And then Beacon, which again, Cheeks and Beacon, very similar to these shades from the Lure palette. And then we have Maybe, which very similar to this one from the Primal. And then Taboo, which again, it's very similar to this deep shade from the Primal. Or no, from the, from the Primal. And then again, just for funsies, we're gonna do Charmed and Pulse. And honestly, Pulse is also very similar to some of these shades. Again, very few of these I would say are exact dupes. Like, these are from the Lure, and these two are from the Surge. And these are definitely more muted than the ones from the Lure, but these are still very similar. And like this one from the Primal, very similar to this one from the Lure. You know, so again, something to keep in mind. A lot of these do overlap. They're very similar. The palettes as a whole are not, but, you know, individual rows, definitely. And again, if you're interested in the palette as a whole, that's very different. But this is 3 palettes, and this is a ton of shades that have some overlap. All right, now we're going to do the orangey shades. So we're going to start with the Dollhouse, and we have Endless, which is a very light creamsicle color. And then we have Plastic and Fasten. And I'm definitely going to be swatching all of the dark brownie shades against each other, just because I think that'll be interesting. So we have those, and again, these are from the Dollhouse palette. Kind of. All right. So then from the Primal, we have Untamed. Oh, I forgot Rome. So we have Rome. And then we have Huntress. So I did those kind of out of order, but that's all right. And we have the Surge. And have Cutouts. Ooh, it's very similar to this one from the Dollhouse. Juicy. And Grunge, which is more of like a brown. So again, not a lot of similarities amongst these, but you know, you could possibly get some of the same looks with these. These are, the ones from the Dollhouse are definitely much cooler in tone than the other two, but these shades, these two very light orange shades from the Surge and the Dollhouse are still very similar. You know, the ones from the Primal are definitely very bright, more reddy. Like very red, bricky toned, very, like, this one's like almost a true carmine shade, I would say. Like, it's a very red orange shade, but again, very bright in comparison. Even the deepening shades, the Surge is very warm in comparison to the Dollhouse, like very warm. Now we're gonna do kind of like all the blue shades against each other, the blues and the teals or turquoises. So we're going to start with the lure. We're going to have Lost at Sea, Sea Nymph, and 332 meters. Then we have Catch Me, Explore, and The Deep. Alright, now we're going to go to the Primal. I'm going to do Mimic, Poisonous, and Ink. And then in the Surge, we have Chills, Rush, and Linger. And none of those are similar. Well, I mean, they're similar in the way that they're similar colors, but they're not dupes. They're very different shades. Now, these two lighter shades, sure, they'd have the same effect on the eyes, but as far as like the tones and depth and hue of the rest of the shades, they're not similar really at all. So yeah, I'm gonna do green shades now. So we're gonna start with the Lure palette. We have Sea Foam, Mermaid Lagoon, Uncharted, we have Mint, Alive, and Lush, and those are from the Surge. And then we're gonna do Chemistry down here just for fun. I guess we can do Locked as well from the Surge. It's actually very similar to Lush, which is also in the Surge. And then from the Primal, we have Luna, Toxin, and Camouflage, which Toxin could be very close to this neon shade from the Surge. So there those are. Now we're going to swatch all of the deeper shades against each other. So I got Black Sea here, which is a very dark black color. We have Vinyl from the Surge. Oh, this is from the Lure. So Vinyl from the Surge, which kind of has like a khaki, almost green tinge to it. And the Primal, we have the big shade called Nocturnal. Which is, again, very black. And then we have Stitched from the Dollhouse. So again, each one of these palettes basically has a black shade. You know, so, which, it's good for a deepening shade, but honestly, there's some minute differences in the tones of these shades, but I wouldn't say it would be enough to like really matter once you got it on the eyes. They're all gonna blend basically the same, you know. But yeah, so now we're gonna start with some of the shimmer shades. And typically what I do is turn some of the lights off, manipulate the lights, but I'm not going to be doing that today as this is more or less, this was more or less about the matte shades anyway. So we're going to start with the Dollhouse palette, and I'm going to swatch all of the kind of pink toned shimmers. So we have 3 of those in this palette. First we have Pretend, then we have Tulle, which is my favorite, and then we have Little Sister, which is more of like a orangey-ish shade, I guess. And then we have Dress Up, which is very dark, and again, more of like a bronze kind of shade. Like definitely more of a bronze than a pink. We have the Primal, which has Feral in it. We have the Lure, which has Charmed and Sailor's Delight. And Sailor's Delight is very similar to this one from the Dollhouse. And then we also have Pearl. I'm going to put it up here because I think it's very similar in a lot of ways to Tulle. That one's stunning. That's more of like a multi-chrome shade. And then we have All Mine from the Surge, which I'm going to swatch against this one from the Primal because I think they're similar but not similar. And then I'm going to go ahead and do Flash up against Pearl. This is also from the Surge because I think they're versions of each other without being, you know, the same shade. They're like siblings. Pearl is just the pink toned version of Flash. Flash is very definitely kind of a gold yellow. I like it when shades are like that, you know, they're similar but also different. Like they provide the same, they would do the same thing in a palette. And then we have Lace from Dollhouse, which is another very special shade. Again, I feel like it's a sibling to those two, just more of a white neutral, where this is very warm. Pearl is very definitely a like lavender pink with a green shift to it, you know. It's a very special shade. But those are all kind of like the pinky-ish tones in the palettes. All right, now we're going to do kind of all like the gold and warm tones. So we're going to start with the Dollhouse, and we have Pin Curls, Mannequin. I'm going to do darker shades down here. Marionette. And then we're going to move to the Primal, where we have Potent and Regal. So Potent, Regal, that's from the Dollhouse. These two from the Dollhouse. And again, the Primal palette, they're very deeply pigmented in comparison to some of the other palettes. And then in the Surge, we again have Flash, and then we have Zip It Up. So again, no real true similarities except maybe between these two or these two, but even then they're not that similar. Alright, so that's all kind of like the orange goldy shades, all the purple and blue shades, of which there are not that many. So we're going to start with Glass Eyes and Imaginary from the Dollhouse. Glass Eyes is a blue, kind of with a purple shift to it. And then Imaginary is a dark purple. We're going to put the purples over here. And we're going to do the Primal, and we have Pheromones and Morph here. So we have Morph right there and Pheromones right there. right, and then in the Surge palette, we have Euphoric there and underneath right there. And then lastly, the Lure palette. We have several blues and teals in here. So we're going to start with Folklore. And we have In a Bottle. And finally, Bioluminescent. Alright, so nothing too similar, except these three shades from the Lure palette are very similar to each other, which is interesting. I didn't notice that before, really. But they're different enough, I guess, except these two shades. I don't know, they're just so similar. Other than this one kind of has like a gold flip to it, and this one is a silvery flip. It's kind of interesting. Now we're going to do all the green toned and otherwise shimmers. So we have Chantilly and Harlequin, both from the Dollhouse. So Harlequin is like a black with silver, and Chantilly is like a very aged antique green gold looking shade. And then in the Primal palette, we have Slither, which is a beautiful green, like dark green, and it has blue and gold and yellow glitter in it. It is an absolutely stunning shade. And then finally in the Surge, we have Limitless, which is a brighter green, I guess you could say. Yeah, brighter green. Alright, so there's that. Definitely no similarities there. Alright, so we are at our end. And what I think I have discovered doing this is there is a lot of overlap with the matte shades, as there would be with a brand that has as many shades as this one does, that has, you know, these delineated rows that kind of, you know, blend into each other, right? And as far as the shimmers, there's not really a whole lot of overlap, which I honestly was really impressed with, that there's as wide a variety with the shimmers, especially as these palettes don't have a lot of them. Now, again, I only have 4 of 8 palettes that BlendBunny has released so far, but I am sure within the other palettes there's even more overlap in the mattes. I mean, we saw a lot of these light pink and purple shades are very similar to the other light pink and purple shades in the other palettes. The same with the deepening shades, a lot of those black shades. I'm sure the brown shades and some of these are very similar to each other, but as far as the more unique shades, like the yellows and the oranges, there's not really a lot of overlap in those within these palettes. Again, I don't have all of them. This is not even a criticism of BlendBunny for this, because not everybody is going to have 8 palettes from the same brand. You know, not even everybody is going to have 4. They're probably just going to have 1 or 2. I mean, I don't even have the original Blends palette. You know, I do hope to have it at some point, but looking at it compared to these palettes that I do have, I don't even know that it would be necessary for me to have it. You know, like, I can probably make whatever looks with these palettes that I could with the Blend palette. You know, I can make similar looks within the palettes I have. But I do think it is important to recognize for myself, I can't speak for anyone but myself, but for myself to recognize that just because I like the overall color story, I mean, what colors am I going to gravitate to out of this palette? For one, this row of neutral shades, definitely, and I have used it a ton. This row of kind of teal shades, this row of true blues, you know, and look to see what's similar in other palettes, because, you know, we have this row of blues that, you know, could create a similar look. in this palette, we have 2 rows of neutrals and this row of purples that could create a similar look to the row of neutrals in the Lure palette. And, you know, on and on with the Surge. It's the same way that, you know, sure, it might not be exact, but there's green and kind of this teal, muted teal shade row of, you know, here, and I could do a very similar look here that I could with this palette. I mean, in all honesty, these two palettes have a lot of the same vibe as each other, and that's just something I need to consider, that it's not always the overall color story. Sometimes it's what's within the color story that I already have in the collection of palettes that I have. You know, this isn't even looking at, you know, I recently just got this Rick and Morty palette, and look at that. I mean, I can create all of the same or similar looks with this palette that I can with, you know, this palette. You know, those are very similar to each other. And even once we get the Surge, you know, I didn't need to buy this palette because I had these. And that is, you know, something, again, I want to strongly remind myself, even within the same brand, you don't need every palette from a brand, because even within the same brand, they're going to be duping themselves. They're going to be creating similar shades. They're going to be creating maybe even similar color stories, because in my opinion, their newest palette, the grungy 90s themed one, is very, very similar to the Lure and the Dollhouse. Like, to me, that grunge palette is just a mashup of these two palettes. And do I think that's bad? No, because maybe somebody doesn't have the Dollhouse or the Lure, and they're interested in that one. But if you have the Dollhouse and the Lure, you might not need to get the grunge palette. And again, that is something to strongly consider when purchasing makeup, to be thoughtful. For myself, again, because am I drawn to it? Yes, I think those shades are beautiful. But because I have these two, and I can create similar looks with what I already have, just within this brand's palettes, let alone the other palettes in my collection, I don't need to be bringing in more makeup. And that is something that, you know, I kind of want to leave off with this, that you look at the swatches, you decide for yourself how you feel about that. But also, maybe before you buy a palette, look within your collection to see what looks would you make with that palette, and what palettes do you have, what shades do you have that you could make that look with. You don't need a specific shade of purple to get a really nice purple look. Like, again, look at this palette, and then let's look at this Glamlight palette. You know, if I want to make a purple look, I can make a purple look right here. I don't need these purple shades to make a purple look here. You know, and on the eyes, it's going to look extremely similar. You know, and the same thing within this brand itself. If I want to make a purple look, I can make a purple look. You know, I can use these shades to make a purple look that would be extremely similar to this one. And if I wanted it a little purpler, you know, I can add this. Or if I wanted it this one pinker, I can add some of these. You know, it's just, again, something to consider, and I'm going to stop beating us all over the heads with it. But I do need to remind myself, you know, I wanted the Primal palette so badly, and when they were discontinuing it, I thought, you know, hey, it's finally my time to get it. And yet, in all honesty, I have these shades. What am I going to reach for in this palette? Specifically, this row of Periwinkle and Indigo. And I have Periwinkles and Indigos in my collection. I didn't need to get this palette. Even though these shades are kind of unique, even within the palettes I have from BlendBunny, they're not necessarily unique within my whole collection of palettes and single shadows. So, you know, again, I hope this will help you. It has been, again, eye-opening for me, something I just need to remind myself of more and more often, that I don't have to have every palette, and especially once you get into these bigger palettes, you don't need every single palette from a brand just because you like them. They probably have already done that shade or similar in a different palette, you know? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this helped you if you're interested in one of these palettes. Maybe it helped you decide which one you wanted or which one you don't actually need. And I hope you will come back to watch more videos in the future, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.